Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to something else. Something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matano, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to yet another bonus show, another bonus episode of Something Else here on the Something Else Podcast Network. This is the third in 3 fucking days. Well, I guess it's now Monday, so it's the third in 4 fucking days. At this point, I'll have more bonus shows than regular shows by the end of May. So, ladies and gentlemen, I lied. I said, well, actually, I didn't entirely lie. I did partially tell the truth. I'm not sitting here on late Sunday night at 12:30 a.m. talking about how Swerve Strickland won the AEW title because, as promised, I had to go to sleep because I had the shoot job in the morning. Instead, it's Monday night at 8:36, and here I am to do a podcast about Dynasty. Now, of course, by this point, theoretically, you've already heard anybody you'll have wanted to hear talk about Dynasty. Because, it's been 24 hours. If you're that interested, you probably listen to it. But I already took the notes. I'm already sitting here to record Wednesday Something Else. What the hell? Pull up the microphone, turn it on, and just start talking about All Elite Wrestling. So let's dive right in. It's the AEW Dynasty 2024 pay-per-view, April 21st, 2024, live from the Chaifetz Arena in St. Louis, Missouri. So AEW had been teasing doing monthly pay-per-views there for a while, and now, it's basically official. Like, they're doing 10 AEW branded pay-per-views this year. The only 2 months that they're not is February and October, but every other month is going to have an AEW pay-per-view this year, and please do not ask me to review all of them. And as I say that, I'm sure I'll fucking be here to review all of them. But let's just take this one at a time, shall we? Let's talk about Dynasty. So, this is a show, and we've seen this happen with, the extra AEW pay-per-views in the past year, like All Out after All In, like Wrestle Dream. Essentially, the show is built around 3 big matches, maybe even 4 big matches, and the rest of it is pretty much filler. Now, this show, the main draw were the 3 main events, and the rest of the show, yes, including the opener, was pretty much filler. It was there so we could do a 4-hour pay-per-view. But to be perfectly honest, outside of the opener, if this entire show had just been the last 90 minutes, I don't think anyone really would have complained, to be perfectly fucking honest. But let's go through the show here. We kicked it off with, I'm not going to talk about the pre-show. Trent beat Matt Sydal. Orange Cassidy and Shibata beat Lee Moriarty and Shane Taylor. And the Ass Boys and Jay White beat the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass. That was the pre-show. Okay, moving on. Continental Champion Kazuchika Okada versus Pac. During the pre-show, it was implied that Danielson Ospreay would start the show, and let's just say it was a very good idea for it to not start the show. Now, as always, AEW had the revolving door of announcers, and Excalibur was the only person that did every match on this show. Taz did the majority of them, and we'll mention when he got replaced. But for the opener, we are joined with Jim Ross, booed as the opener in the main event. Hey, you know what? The only other match I would rather have him do was the Ospreay match. But this one was pretty. If you're going to give him 2 matches, those were probably the 2 best matches to give him. So the Continental Championship, well, I get they're trying to do different rules for different title belts to make them mean more. And, the FTW title has been basically the hardcore title. And, I mean, let's be honest, that's pretty much the only title that's had rules. The Continental Championship, the rule is no interference. Legitimately, why is that not the rule for every match? And they did finally explain to us what happens if there is interference. There'd be fines, suspensions, etc. It's like, okay. So what is stopping the EVPs from running in on every Okada title defense? Because in theory, they have the power to just say, fuck the suspension, fuck the fine, and move on from there. But again, we're just, we'll get to the Young Bucks when we get to them today. So a lot of mat wrestling to start, with Pac working a side headlock to gain the advantage before flipping the switch, getting Okada on the outside of the ring before running into the ring, off the ropes, and back out with a tope. Pac sent Okada shoulder first into the barricade and continued to work the shoulder as the match continued, including hitting a top rope brainbuster back in the ring. Pac went for the Black Arrow, but Okada sprung not only to his feet, but into the air with a drop kick that sent Pac flying onto the pretty black mats. Okada did the Randy Orton draping DDT. However, calling it the Randy Orton draping DDT implies that Pac had his feet stretched on the bottom rope and pulled out and DDT'd right smack dab in the almost middle of the ring. However, they did it a little differently. Okada did the draping DDT on the outside with Pac's feet on the guardrail. And the fans, who, by the way, the fans, really played their part in this, in last night's show here. They chanted, "You sick fuck" at him while he just laughed. I legitimately don't know if he even understood what they were chanting, but it was the perfect response. Let's just say that. Pac came back and used a springboard moonsault to the floor, but sold his neck as he landed. They teased a countout multiple times here. And it did help that Paul Turner takes about an hour and a half to count to 1. So in that sense, both guys were able to properly sell before hopping back in the ring. Both men olayed moves in the ring, and a crazy series saw Pac hit a snap German suplex, where the momentum brought Okada flipping over to his feet and legitimately hit a shotgun dropkick, which is really nice. Okada teased the Rainmaker pose, and of course, if somehow you know who Okada is, but somehow never watched New Japan, what he does, he throws his arms out to his side, and the camera zooms all the way out. I did that once at work, and I looked ant-sized in the security camera. So instead of doing the Rainmaker pose, he flipped the fans off. And it was, again, just tremendous. Okada is having a fucking ball playing heel in America. Pac hit a Mafia kick, but missed the Black Arrow again. Okada went for the Rainmaker, but Pac used the Crucifix for a near fall. Okada went for something, but Pac turned it into the Brutalizer, standing up, and somehow Okada raked his eyes to get out of it. Pac goes for the Black Arrow a third time, and this time Okada got his knees up, hit the Rainmaker, and won. Okada still your Continental Champion. A fantastic match to start the show, but it wasn't so overwhelming that no one had a chance like it would have if they would have started with the Danielson-Ospreay match. And in case you did not check out the TNA Rebellion review I did, basically what I do is I rate every match on a scale of 1 to 10. If it comforts you to think of things in star ratings, just take my rating and cut it in half. And that gives you your star rating. But anywho, I gave this match an 8.5 out of 10. House of Black versus Adam Copeland, Mark Briscoe, and Eddie Kingston. So Eddie Kingston had 3 championship belts at the last AEW pay-per-view. He has since lost 2 of them, one of which to Okada, and won the ROH title to Mark Briscoe. Buddy Matthews is in a team with Brody King and Malachi Black, and he is dating Rhea Ripley, and he has almost 0 tattoos. I think he has the one on his shin, and that's about it. Hey, no shame in his game. It's just kind of funny. Somehow, though, it does explain why the babyfaces were able to shine on him after Malachi had warmed them up. Black at one point tags in with Copeland, but he refused to make any contact, so he tagged right back out. That was the story of this match, was for whatever reason, Malachi Black wouldn't wrestle with Adam Copeland. But so Kingston tags in, and they get the heat on him for a little bit. Kingston encouraged Buddy Matthews to give him a running draw kick, so he did. So despite what you may hear, don't let it be said that Buddy Matthews doesn't listen to what the veterans tell him to do. Mark Briscoe got the tag and ran wild on Matthews. He went for a dive off the apron, but Malachi and Brody stepped in the way, which led to the 6-way brawl. Here's a crazy spot that, unfortunately, it was so forgotten that I forgot about it until I, read through my notes here. So Mark, again, is still on the apron. He takes a metal chair and sits it up on the apron. And then he runs down the apron, jumps off the chair, and did a flipping senton over the post to Black. Again, the margin of error in a move like that, incredibly slim. And we talked about margin of error during the TNA review the other night. Incredibly slim sometimes. So Buddy kneed Mark in the head. He fell on the shoulders of Brody, who did a DVD into the guardrail, which was the spot that somehow, of all the spots, that was the spot that settled the match back down into a tag team match, as our 6-way brawl broke down into a 6-man tag. Mark eventually makes the tag to Copeland, and again, Black avoided contact and allowed Brody carte blanche to get his ass kicked. Copeland gave Brody a superplex, where Brody may have landed in Kansas City at this point. From here was everybody hits everyone with something, and Copeland would have pinned Brody after a Mark Briscoe froggy bow, but Buddy made the save. Finally, Malachi tags in with Copeland, but they still don't touch because Mark Briscoe steps in, and we just continued with a 6-way free-for-all. At this point, it makes you wonder why they bothered tagging in, although there were tags. It just makes no sense when everyone is just fighting in and around the ring. All 3 faces hit all 3 heels with a spear, but somehow that led to 5 people falling to the floor. Copeland goes for the spear on Malachi, but Malachi spat the Black spew into his face, hit the end, and got the win. So I'm assuming this means, based on the rules of the Black spew of the House of Black, Adam Copeland will be turning into Julia Hart soon. A disturbing thought, if there ever was one. A fine 6-man tag, but you've seen a lot better. House of Black are your winners, rating 4.0 out of 10. All right, speaking of stupid rules. TBS champion Julia Hart versus Willow Nightingale in a house rules match. It has never been explained why the House of Black is allowed to just create these house rules matches. And if this is a match that they're creating, why do they allow their opponent the ultimate stipulation? And why does their opponent come up with, honestly, stipulations that really could have just been ignored with how pointless, we'll say, how pointless they were. So the whole point of a house rules match is the 20 count out on the floor, and there are no rope breaks. And then the babyface gets to choose any stipulation they like. Now, Willow is a lovable babyface who, of course, would not do anything to, cheat the system or whatever. But in theory, why isn't the rule that she put that Julia Hart has to lay on with her back on the mat and is not allowed at any point during the match to lift her shoulders off the ground. Legitimately, match is going to be over in 3 seconds. But nope, the stipulation is that neither Sky Blue nor Chris Statlander are allowed at ringside. Keep in mind that this meant that Stokely Hathaway could be there, which he was. He was at the broadcast table. Keep in mind that meant all 3 members of House of Black could have just ran out. They didn't, but they could have. But ultimately, they should have just said no interference because nobody interfered. I still can't believe this is the same Julia Hart who was once the cheerleader for the Varsity Blondes. Like, could not give 2 shits about that Julia Hart. And, she just does an amazing character shift where she goes from that to this. And it was funny because, I'm not expecting her to live the goth lifestyle. I remember, whenever it was that she got married, I think it was to Lee Johnson. It's like they had pictures of her wedding, and she looked like Varsity Blondes Julia Hart who got married. It just didn't look right. Although, congratulations, I'm happy for them, yada, 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 yada. But you know what I mean, right? So, this was a very different Willow as soon as the bell rang. She ran across the ring to attack Julia. Willow was pulling out the hammer and nails because she was building momentum until Julia booted her right off the top rope to the floor. They showed Mercedes watching from backstage because she'll face the winner at Double or Nothing. Julia got on Heartless, but Willow rolled through and stood up with Julia on her back to break the hold. Julia hit a few super kicks and went for a moonsault, but Willow got her feet up. No. I'm sure when I said that, you heard me say Willow got her knees up, and Julia did a moonsault on to Willow's knees. That's not what I said. Julia did a moonsault, and Willow got her feet up. Julia landed gut first on Willow's feet. I guess, I don't know, is that worse? I don't know. I wouldn't want to land on your knees either. I don't know. Let's ask Matt Sydal. Wasn't he screwed up a shooting star once and somehow landed on someone's foot instead of, their waist? I don't know. Anyway, Willow hit the gut wrench powerbomb for the win and the championship. So, weakest match of the show, and unless I'm forgetting something, it stood the test throughout the rest of the show. This was the weakest, but the right woman won. I love Julia, but it was her time to lose here. After the match, Stokely and Chris ran in to hug Willow. Mercedes then came out and barely acknowledged Willow's existence. Mercedes came out to dance, and, she looked good dancing. And she danced right in front of Willow, and they'll be wrestling at Double or Nothing. So Willow's your winner, rating 1.5 out of 10. International Champion Roderick Strong versus Kyle O'Reilly. This match is really happening completely out of the blue. And I get we're doing monthly pay-per-views, so we gotta speed things up. However, Kyle O'Reilly just came back last month. You had months of programming. It was like the slow build. They already had the slow build starting here where, Roddy is inviting him into the kingdom and O'Reilly's like, nah, man, I'm all set. And it's like, okay, that's fine. And they just go their separate ways and it slowly builds from there. Nah, man, that's not what we had to have here. Instead, Strong turned on O'Reilly and they're already having a match here 5 weeks after Roddy returned. I'm sorry, after Kyle returned. So a lot of strong mat wrestling, no pun intended, to start the match until Strong dropped Kyle with a backbreaker, and then he second one across the turnbuckle on the top rope. That continued to be the story throughout the match as Strong just hit one backbreaker after another, which didn't just injure the back, but also the neck, which, Kyle nearly had to retire after an 18-month absence after a neck injury. So even though Roderick Strong's gimmick is he hits 8 million backbreakers, it made perfect sense in the context of this match that that's what would be happening here. O'Reilly hit a series of rapid-fire leg kicks, but got dropped with an Olympic slam. Strong propped Kyle against the ropes and then ran back and forth on the opposite strand, punching Kyle as he went by. We got a fun exchange of strikes that reminded me of the glory days of when New Japan had the never openweight title. And they still have it, but I'm thinking about like the days when it was Minoru Suzuki and Makabe and, Hiroki Goto. And it was the strong style title where people beat the shit out of each other. And honestly, I'd love to see that be what the international title becomes, because you got a lot of these strong style wrestlers like Strong and O'Reilly who can go out there and just like it'd be something different on the show. And like you don't have to just call attention to it. You just do it. And the problem with modern day wrestling is no one does that. If you're going to do something, you have to make sure everybody knows about it. You can't have any subtlety. Give us a little bit. Give us some fucking subtlety, people here, please. Anyway, so Kyle got the best of the strikes, and that's when Wardlow strolled to ringside, threatening to interfere. In fact, he actually walked up the steps and got in the ring, but he got caught by the referee and stopped before he could do anything. Kyle took a page out of Jon Moxley's book and hit the rebound lariat before going for a cross arm breaker. Strong fought it, but couldn't stop it. Luckily, however, for the champ, he was close enough to get his foot on the ropes. And finally, Strong hit End of Heartache for the clean win. Now, apparently Wardlow was in a car accident before the show. And so there is a chance that the booking of this match completely changed based on that. And I sincerely wish Wardlow nothing but the best. And hopefully he's all set. Or if he's not, he will be all set shortly. With that said, I don't want to say Wardlow ruined this match, because that is a strong word to say ruined. But him coming to the ring took the match down a peg, because now you were just waiting for the interference that never happened. So after the match is where the eyebrows started being raised. So Taven, Bennett, and Cole came out. And of course, Cole's been injured, since September when he ran down the aisle to help MJF in his match with Samoa Joe, jumped off the ramp, and, fractured his leg. And it's been 7 months. And guess what? He's healthy. He stood right up. And he walked to the ring. And it's a miracle. But, as Excalibur pointed out, he's been out for 7 months. It's about time for his injury to have healed by now. Anyway, in the ring, and hey, we did get a little bit of subtlety, even though it really wasn't that subtle, but hey, in professional wrestling in 2024, this is subtle. Cole gave Wardlow the evil eye. And of course, if you've been watching AEW, it's because the whole storyline that has never been brought up ever again was that Wardlow was supposed to win the AEW title against Samoa Joe, and then once Cole came back, he was supposed to just forfeit the belt to Cole. And then Wardlow lost the match to Joe last month, and, it never got brought up again. But, so we'll see where that goes from here. But I imagine, because, we gotta have, Wardlow's only allowed to be in one storyline, and that's, he's in a group with somebody who abuses him. And eventually, people, in theory, get behind him. It kind of worked the first time. So Roderick Strong wins, rating 6.0 out of 10. Then another feud that escalated out of nowhere, FTW champion Hook versus Chris Jericho in an FTW rules match, which, as we mentioned, just means the hardcore match. These two were just friends. Might be a strong word, friend. And they were setting a foundation, and now Jericho's turned on him and we have a title match. So they tried. They really did. But this match, not good. Um, the fans spill out, or yeah, the match spills out of the ring fairly quickly, and Hook goes for a jumping punch off the apron that missed by a foot, but Jericho still sold it. Luckily for him, this may have been ECW rules, but not an ECW audience, as no one chanted that anything was fucked up. Hook got out of a power bomb and used a German suplex on the floor, where Jericho nearly landed headfirst on the ring steps. Hook got a trash can lid and waylaid Jericho in the head with it. As I mentioned in the TNA review, I am so not a fan of unprotected weapon shots to the head, even when it's just a trash can lid. I'm sorry. Get your fucking hand up. A table had been set up on the floor, and Hook did a T-bone suplex off the apron through the table. And this was not a Jericho crowd. This may be something to keep an eye out for, and maybe consider and just go, oh, well, Jericho's a heel, and the crowd is reacting him the way they're supposed to. But let's be honest, no one actually fucking cheers and boos the way they're supposed to. They cheer and boo who they like and who they hate. And they hated them some Jericho on this show. They were chanting, go home, Jericho, go home. And that was one of the nicer things they said about him. Jericho hit a super hurricanrana, which is still an impressive move, but he could have been saving children from a fire, and this crowd would still boo him. Hook put a trash can over Jericho's head, and they used one of those TNA strong-style trash cans from Rebellion, as that thing did not want to dent at all. Hook set up another table, this one in the corner of the ring, but that just sat there for a while, so ignore that one. But that, just keep in mind that's there, but just kind of ignore it. Jericho hits a code breaker. Hook avoids a middle fist drop and locks on Red Rum. However, Jericho backed up and sprung them through the table that had been set up previously. I guess I really didn't need you to forget about that table, since it got broken 2 sentences later, right? Hook ducked the Judas effect and goes for a knee bar. Jericho turned that into the walls of Jericho, and Hook somehow turned that into a small package for a near fall. Hook got on Red Rum again, but Jericho kicked him in the ass and hit the Judas effect, but Hook kicked out. Jericho hit a second Judas effect, but Hook again kicked out. It was said that Moxley's the only person to ever kick out of the Judas effect, and now Hook is kicked out of 2 of them. Jericho grabs a baseball bat and yelled at Hook to stay down. Hook answered by flipping off Jericho, so Jericho hit him with the bat for the win. Now, I should say that when Jericho hit Hook with the bat, the crowd, popped louder than they had for almost anything in the past hour of this show. And it's like, it made no sense. Why are they popping, for Jericho hitting him in the face with a bat? Now, this is before Jericho even made the cover. But he hits Hook with the bat, crowd goes nuts. The reason the crowd went nuts is because Taz, on commentary, took his headset off and stood up. And so everyone popped thinking Taz was going to go kick Jericho's ass. Nope, just a poorly timed stand-up by Taz. And he did not get involved. After Jericho won the match and the title, Taz did go over and order Jericho out of the ring while he and the medics checked on his son, and that was it for Taz on Dynasty. And at least that makes sense, because when you watch a kid take a baseball bat to the face, him going back for the next match and making, his little jokes, probably not for the best. So I do want to nitpick a little bit here, because, I'm the queen of nitpicking shit. This has been going on forever. Okay, I get it. So just gonna say it flat out. This is something that's been on forever. I have locked you in a move from behind, a choke or whatever, and I back kick you. And everybody in the world can see what I have done is kick through your legs and kick you in the ass with the heel of my foot. However, and this has been going on forever. 24 plus years it's been going on. You sell it like you got kicked in the dick. I'm not saying you should kick him in the dick, but I'm saying it was not a kick to the dick, it was a kick to the ass. I know it's a comedy spot to sell the ass, but then don't do it. But that's what happened. You get kicked in the ass and you sell your dick. So this match was blah, blah, blah. This match, like me trying to put together a sentence, wasn't all that good and really exposed how green Hook still is. And of course, this feud has to continue. Rating 2.5 out of 10. So Nigel McGuinness tags in to join the announce team for the rest of the show as we get our next match, Women's Champion Timeless Toni Storm with Luther and Mariah May versus Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa wore a mask to the ring, took it off, and she was not wearing her trademark face paint. She just looked like whatever Thunder Rosa's real name is. She looked like her. Toni is the one wearing the face paint here. She was wearing pale white face paint, which, by the way, would have looked really cool had they done the match in black and white. But for many reasons, thankfully, they didn't do that. But, you know, I think it would have looked a lot cooler if the match had done the black and white filter. So they started the match with a flurry of punches from both ladies. Rosa knocked Storm to the floor into the waiting arms of Luther, but Rosa did a tornado dive off the top to the floor. Mariah May teased getting involved, but she was back down. Storm turned things around and began walking on Thunder's back. Now, when I was younger, I was asked to walk on a friend's back to crack it. That was not what Toni was doing here. She was not trying to do cheap masseuse work. Rosa keeps fighting back. She uses a Samoan drop and a crucifix to get a pair of near falls. Rosa rolled through a move and did a double stomp right to the breasts, where her foot may have also slipped and caught Toni in the jaw. And no matter what, that could not have felt good. They exchanged shots to the face. Well, it started as an exchange, but Rosa got the best of it and just kept going. Storm made a headbutt coming off the ropes and celebrated by doing a German suplex, but Rosa hit one of hers. Mariah May gets in on the action, so Deonna Purrazzo runs down, yanks Mariah off the apron, and throws Luther into the steps. Deonna and Mariah fight to the back, and Storm hit the running hip attack, and Storm 0 for a near fall. Storm got on the Texas Cloverleaf, but Rosa dragged herself by the nails to the ropes. She hits a backstabber. She locked on a move that was a cross between a Cobra Clutch and a rear naked choke, which, I'll be honest, that was a cool looking fucking move. But that wasn't the finish, as Storm dragged her entire body under the ropes. Storm then gave Rosa the cunt punt and hit Storm 0 for the win. Well, it does hurt women too. This match was pretty good. I am not a fan at all of the timeless Toni Storm gimmick, but she does a fantastic job of it. And every time I ever talk about a timeless Toni Storm match, I will say I hate the gimmick, but she does a great job with it. So rating for that match, a 5.0. Okay. It's 10:25. Including the pre-show, this thing's been going on now for 4 hours. Because, oh yeah, the pre-show started at like 6:30 with 30 minutes of Renee and RJ talking. So it's now almost 10:30. It is almost 4 hours later. And this is one of the issues with AEW pay-per-views, and it helped that for a change they saved their 3 biggest matches till the very end. But way too often, AEW will get to that point. You're 4 hours into the show, you're ready for the fucking main event, and here comes 3 or 4 filler matches just to get people on the show. And you're just like begging for the fucking main event at this point. Well, at this point, just when you're starting to beg for the main event, here comes the main event. Will Ospreay, Bryan Danielson. I've got a major nitpick at the end. However, until the last 30 seconds, this fucking match was phenomenal. And you, I'm sure, have heard a lot of great things about this match. and the superlatives are off the wall. And we'll go through them all. We'll go through every single thing that happened in this match, or at least I'll attempt to. But I've got a major fucking nitpick that to me takes the match down. Even if it takes down a teensiest step, I still couldn't put the final stamp of approval as the greatest match ever on it because of the ending. So this continues the storyline of Danielson just having random matches with people, and Don Callis joins the broadcast team. The bell hadn't even rung, and it was already the best match on the show, and the bell rang, and we got a standing ovation. Legitimately, I don't know how often you've ever seen a standing ovation at the opening bell, but we got one here. Like, I think this happened during the Goldberg-Hulk Hogan match on Nitro, but that's about it. So far during this show, twice we've mentioned great mat wrestling throughout the show. Well, the first 3 minutes of this match made everyone else look like green rookies on their first day of wrestling school. We got a flurry of blocks and reversals that ended with neither of them hitting a single move and ending in a face-off. Danielson flips off Ospreay, so Ospreay chops Danielson's chest raw. The fans began chanting, "Fuck Don Callis," which, to be honest, I don't think he swings that way, but I'm sure he appreciates the thought. Danielson used a few lifters that made Ospreay 6'5", and Will shrunk back down in time to send Danielson cascading out of the ring before diving to the floor. Ospreay went for a springboard what a maneuver into the ring and got kicked right in the ribs for his efforts. I don't think anybody believably sells an individual move as well as Ospreay. You can argue, and we'll argue till the cows come home, whether or not selling is still really used much to this day. But for one individual move at a time, I don't think anyone sells as well as Ospreay. So Ospreay hits his corkscrew kick to the head, which gave them both time to breathe and allow the crowd to chant, "This is awesome." Ospreay used a corkscrew plancha off the turnbuckle to the floor, not the ropes, which give you some bounce, by the way, but the turnbuckle, like the metal pole between the pad and the post. That is where he jumped from. Ospreay went for the hidden blade, but Danielson kicked him in the exposed elbow before introducing Ospreay's face to his elbow, and then the cattle mutilation, but Ospreay reached the ropes. Danielson used the Super Hurricanrana, but Ospreay kept flipping over and landed on his feet, negating the entire move. Unfortunately for the aerial assassin, he couldn't avoid Danielson's next top rope move, which was a dragon suplex of all things. And the eventual cover was only broken by Ospreay because he got his foot on the ropes. Ospreay gets a sinister look on his face as he hooks Danielson for a tiger driver on the apron, but Danielson blocked that. However, Danielson then could not block an Os cutter on said apron. The referee began checking on Danielson, who was dragging himself to his feet on the floor. Ospreay used a hidden blade off the apron, and it looked like Danielson crashed into Bryce Remsburg. I would say Bryce deserved that, but on replay, you were able to see that Bryce got out of the way, and, oh well, he'll live to get bumped another day. Back in the ring, Danielson locked on a label lock, but again, and say it with me, Ospreay got his foot on the ropes. At this point, if Danielson could have found a way to saw Ospreay's legs off, he'd probably win. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee at all, but he'd probably win. Another long sequence of fabulous moves ended in a Busaiku knee by Danielson. Danielson stomped on Ospreay's head, which, by the way, at this point, I'm loving this crowd. Because at this point, the crowd, about half of them are into Danielson, about half of them are going for Ospreay, and we're not getting dueling chants. Because dueling chants implies you're letting the other side chant at, their part before you do yours. No. Simultaneously, half the crowd is chanting yes, and half the crowd is chanting no. Like, it was great. We'll just say that. Danielson got on a Goga-Plata that Ospreay somehow countered into a Styles clash. Legitimately, I do not have the vocabulary to describe how he did that. However, it was completely believable that such a thing could happen. Ospreay exploded to his feet after being hit with a shoulder capture suplex and hit the hidden blade. He springs off the ropes for an Os cutter, and Danielson hits the most perfectly timed Busaiku knee ever. Finally, they stood across from the ring from each other and signaled for their respective moves, but Ospreay won the battle with the hidden blade. And then we had the finish. Now, before I mention what happens next, I'm just going to say that before this next part, I'm going to describe the match to you. This match was not just amazing. It was astonishing, astounding, surprising, bewildering, stunning, shocking, startling, stupefying, breathtaking, awe-inspiring, sensational, phenomenal, and extraordinary. But I did not like the very end. For those of you who didn't see the match or somehow have avoided hearing anybody else talk about it, Ospreay drops Danielson on his head with a Tiger Driver. Now, if you go back, and I'll admit, go back and watch the replay, Danielson did not land on his head. He landed on his upper shoulders and back, and you could easily argue that he would have slammed his head on the mat. Everybody freaked out. And by everybody, I mean everybody. The crowd freaked out. The announcers freaked out. The referee freaked out. Ospreay freaked out. Danielson was freaking the fuck out while selling. And Ospreay, but this is actually where it gets worse. When, as I, now looking back, like, when this was all happening, it was upsetting, but now even looking back even more, it's even worse. So Doc Samson races to the ring because, he's off to the side. He races to it, and he's conferring with the referee, and Danielson gets to his knees to let Ospreay do the hidden blade for the win. And so Ospreay wins, and Danielson is selling like a madman. And this is where it brings the match down, because this is when I thought this was a legitimate injury or potential injury, it brought the enjoyment of this match down, because I just watched a guy who has had a legitimate history of serious neck and head injuries, and it looked like he got fucked up again. It brought down the enjoyment of the match. And then, by the way, so based purely on that, because I write these things like as soon as I'm watching. Like, I don't go back and watch it a day later and, give it a retroactive rating. Due to that, I could not give this match 10 out of 10. I gave it 9.9. And yes, I know I told you to take my rating, divide it in half, and that's a star rating. And you can't really divide 9.9. But ignoring that, legitimately, I'm more pissed now that I know that Danielson, like that this was all work. And I'm sure there'll be some people who listen to me and say this and go, man, what a fucking mark, But at the end of the fucking day, Danielson, like I said, he had to fucking retire for 3 or 4 fucking years because of these neck and head injuries. It is not comfortable to see somebody like that suddenly get an injury angle where they potentially injure their neck and head. It's not fun. And it took away the fun of the match to even do it. And then it really takes away the fun of it when you find out that he wasn't really hurt. And I get everyone's gonna be entitled to their opinion, and like I know a lot of people love this fucking match, and I loved this fucking match until the finish, and I loved it less when I found out it was bullshit. And I'm kind of interested in seeing what other people think about this, but just one person's opinion did not like the finish, and I wish they wouldn't have done it. So they did take Danielson to the back during the video package for the tag team title match. Excalibur said that he was able to walk to the back with assistance from the medical team and was getting, medical treatment. And again, I wish they wouldn't have done it. They didn't fucking have to. We'll just go from there. Young Bucks versus FTR in a ladder match for the vacant AEW tag team titles. I'm sure I'll say this, the finish was the finish that everybody predicted. Everybody. And I'm sure there'll be some people who sit here and say, oh no, I was the only person who said that. No, shut up. Everybody figured out the finish of this match. And everybody's also now claiming that they were the only person to figure out the finish of this match. So I don't know how many ladder matches FTR have been in, but the difference in experience is astounding. So a couple times at the beginning of this match, much like how the crowd unnaturally cheered when Jericho hit the bat shot to Hook, there was an unnatural boo that came out a couple times at the start of this match. And while I haven't actually gone and read anybody's report, my guess is that somebody kept trying to start a CM Punk chant and got booed down. But that's just purely a guess, because there's no reason for this boo when they kept happening. So Nicholas and Matthew were fast out of the gate. They go for an EVP trigger, but they end up colliding their knees into each other. We got our first ladder involved, far from the last, set up in the ring. Dax sent Matthew into the ropes, but when Matthew rebounded a bit, and this was a cute spot, when Matthew rebounds off the ropes, he veers slightly off, and instead of running back towards Dax, begins running up the ladder. Okay, hate the Bucks, love that spot. Bucks laid Dax on a ladder propped up on the ropes and tried to splash him on it, but Dax turned the tables. Speaking of tables, Cash set up a few around the ringside area. Dax took a shot to the face that busted him open hard way. And by the way, just dripping blood throughout this match. He took a shot with the ladder and a drop toe hold to the steps, so pick your poison on which one did the trick. We had the tables, we had the ladders. We might as well turn this into a TLC match, as chairs were introduced, specifically to Cash's face. Thankfully, Cash got his hands up, and he didn't think he was Sabu's opponent, or Rhea Ripley a few weeks ago. This is where I noted that Dax was just leaking blood all over the ring. Matthew and Nicholas punched Dax repeatedly in the cut. The referee did check on it, and apparently, I didn't see, at one point Dax kind of disappeared for a minute, so I'm thinking the doc checked it out to make sure that it was all set, but they didn't focus on it, but he just kept bleeding the rest of the match. The three of them, I kind of missed that one. So Cash channels his inner high flyer as he slid under a ladder bridge and then did a moonsault to the Bucks. The Bucks and Cash ended up on the ladder with Cash being crotched on it, and the Bucks hit the EVP trigger. This was a ladder bridge from the ring apron to the barricade. Cash came back and hit one terrific move after another to both Jacksons, which continued the story of the feud, that when it comes to actual wrestling, it's FTR all day, every day. However, when you move away from that and you take a step above traditional mat wrestling, That's where the Bucks excel. And love them or hate them, and I don't love them, the Bucks are great at what they do. And this whole thing, this whole story, like over 4 matches, was pretty much perfect, ignoring the added ending with Punk. But Dax slaps on the sharpshooter on Matthew, and Cash put the ladder on top of him and climbed. But of course, Nicholas saved the day. Matthew at one point's on the apron, and Cash did a spear through the ropes, but it wasn't one of those things like Edge did Mick Foley or we saw on the TNA pay-per-view. Only Matthew went flying through the table, but also the cringeworthy part was Matthew not just goes through the table, but slipped with his head crashing into the barricade. As that was just being taken in, Nicholas does a head scissors takeover to Dax on the other side, sending him through a table that didn't break cleanly, and Dax lands on his head. All four ended up on top of the ladders. Matthew was the last survivor, but was out of energy and couldn't recover in time to grab the belts. FTR gave Nicholas a powerplex where both came off the ladders. It is still hard to believe that Paul Roma and Hercules came up with such a great move. On different sides of the ring, Nicholas did a 450 through Cash through a table on the floor, and Dax gave Matthew a pile driver on a ladder bridge, but the ladder slipped. So in some ways it was more dangerous, and in some ways, hey, it was a little safer because it had more give to it now. But both men seemed to be fine. Nicholas did the closest you'll ever see to a perfectly timed sunset flip powerbomb to Dax. Seconds later, Cash goes for a suicide dive, but Nicholas moves out of the way and Cash goes face first through a table. I think holy fuck was the appropriate reply there, but the crowd chanted, please be careful, which is definitely a new one. The finish saw Dax knock Nicholas off the top of the ladder when a man in a Sting mask ran in and shoved Dax off the ladder. Police ran in saying that this was a fan, but of course they took the mask off. And shockingly, I hope everyone's sitting down because nobody saw this coming. It was Jack Perry. They did still, like, even though they kind of acknowledged that, hey, it's Jack Perry, they still had the police drag him out of there. So they're selling that thing here. Anyway, Nicholas got the belts and the Bucks became the 3-time tag team champions. This is a remarkable ladder match, and let's hope they can never talk about the All-In incident ever again. I think we're done with it. Bucks win, rating 7.5. Main event time. So JR tags in, Tony Schiavone tags out. Because, oh yeah, I didn't mention it, but Schiavone did the second match through the 8th match. So Samoa Joe versus Swerve Strickland with Prince Nana for the world title. For those curious, they did replace the canvas with a clean one. So this was not covered in Dax's blood, thankfully. But Joe did a walk-off on a Swerve middle rope dive, but Swerve lands on his feet, sent Joe careening out of the ring, but the big man catches Swerve on a dive and threw him on the announce table. Joe pulled up the mats around the ringside, which gave Strickland enough time to recover and do a Fosbury flop to the champ. After each blocking and reversing a move, Joe hit a snap power slam onto Swerve onto the cold, hard concrete floor. In the ring, Joe swept Swerve's legs from the front, so instead of sweeping from the back, so he lands on his back, he sweeps Strickland's legs from the front and falls face first on the mat. At this point, we evolved into what is a 2024 Samoa Joe match, which, it's a very good version of the 2006 Samoa Joe match. Just, step down. Still very good, just, step down. Back outside the ring, and Swerve discovered that the best offense is sometimes a good defense, as he ducked a left arm blow and Joe collided with the ring post. This gave Swerve the opening to work over the left arm and shoulder. Joe goes for the coquina clutch, but Swerve was able to break it thanks to the weakened arm of Joe. Swerve goes for the cross arm breaker, but Joe fights it off expertly, hits a muscle buster, but it's only a 2 count. Joe was shocked by this, so he went and grabbed the championship belt to use, but Swerve stopped him and hit a 450 splash and a Swerve stomp for a near fall. Joe raked his eyes and grabbed the title belt, but Swerve got it from him. Joe kicked it out of his hands and locked on a coquina clutch, but Swerve got out of that. Swerve did some wacky move where he stood on Joe's arm. Again, he stood on Joe's arm. He bends the other one backwards and then stomps on it. Swerve hit the house call, but Joe kicked out. They ended up on the ropes. Now, by the way, the house calls that move where he kind of jumps behind you and kicks you in the back or the back of the head. But they end up on the ropes, and I think the finish was supposed to be Swerve hits the house call, and then Joe falls down. He gets the Swerve stomp for the pin, or maybe even just the house call supposed to be the finish. But Swerve missed. Instead, it just looked like Swerve dove over the top of him into the ring, and he ran over, power bombs Joe off the ropes, hits a second Swerve stomp for the pin and the title. Swerve Strickland, your new AEW champion. A really good main event. It really couldn't follow the last 2 matches, but they tried their damnedest. So I gave it a 6.0. The crowd exploded for Swerve actually winning and made me think that I don't know if the fans actually thought Swerve was going to win because they don't do a lot of quick title changes. In fact, I don't even know who the shortest AEW champion would be. I mean, I guess it'd be Punk, but okay, ignoring Punk because, injuries and all that shit. Basically just ignoring the whole May through September 2022 part. It was, I guess then it's probably Moxley. Yeah, so it's probably Moxley, but ignoring that, they haven't really done rapid fire AEW title changes, so I think there's still that thing in the back of your mind where it's like, Joe just won the title a few months ago. So it's like, I don't think so. But no, he did the job here clean. The crowd popped for him. The king is dead. Long live the new king. Now, it would be unfair to call him the first homegrown star to win the AEW title, but he is probably the most unexpected homegrown star to win the AEW title. MJF, obviously homegrown star, he won the title, but he was groomed for it from day one. Like, you go back and watch the very first AEW show, it was so obvious that he was being groomed to be the top heel. Swerve was not being groomed to be anything more than mid to high mid card. And really it wasn't until the Hangman feud. And it wasn't, and I'm not saying, it had nothing to do with the matches, but what happened was the crowd was turning on Hangman, if you don't remember, and they were just getting behind Swerve for some ungodly reason. And it just kind of built from there. And then they did that stupid angle where Swerve, broke into Hangman's house, and Hangman was running from the arena, which I think was in Philadelphia, to his home in Virginia to catch Swerve. But, like, that angle, as ridiculous as it was, made Swerve into a top babyface, even though he was a heel. And I seriously can't tell you the point where Swerve turned babyface, or even if he really is a babyface now. But that was when the crowd really got behind him. And, you can say a lot of things about Tony Khan not taking advantage of shit. We saw Wardlow earlier on the show. They dropped the fucking ball on Wardlow like there's nobody's business. But they did not drop the ball on Swerve. You could argue he should have won the belt last month. But in a way, it made sense to hold it off another month to do the singles match. I would have done the match then. I would have done the title switch then just because that match was so much hotter than this one was. This one, unfortunately, it couldn't follow the 2 matches before it. But it was a more than adequate main event. It more than did the trick. And Swerve wins the belt. And I'm interested in seeing where the main event scene goes, and it'll reflect in my final show ratings here. So let's give you our final show ratings. So the match quality, the average match quality over the 9 matches was a 5.66. It's amazing that on a show with the first match and the last 3 matches that the average was right in the middle, but again, that middle of the card really wasn't that great. Overall enjoyment, which as I mentioned, overall enjoyment is how much did I enjoy watching this show? Ignoring match quality, because match quality doesn't always really tell you how much you enjoy a show. Because you could have a show with a lot of great matches, and it's just like you did not enjoy watching this, versus you could have a show with some bad matches, but hey, you had fun watching it. This, I gave an overall enjoyment rating of an 8.5. I had a really fun time watching most of the show. It had its weak points, but the 3 main matches, the 3 matches that you were meant to buy this show to watch, they all delivered in their own way. Future build, it should be higher, but I'm still not trusting on what the future is going to be. So I gave it a 7.5. I'm really, 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 really hoping that this Young Bucks Jack Perry alliance does not become the we're feuding with CM Punk without actually feuding with CM Punk angle. I am interested in seeing how the top of the card will continue to evolve into the pay-per-view next month. But we're just going to put this at a 7.5 for now and go from there. So with that, we average out the 3 final ratings for our overall rating of a 7.22. Really good show. Another one of those shows where I doubt I will ever watch it again, but I really enjoyed the show here. So speaking of really enjoying, I hope you really enjoyed listening to this. This is just shockingly, amazingly, the 6th podcast that has dropped since last Wednesday with me in it. And yeah, sure, one of them I taped in December. One of them was for angrymarks.com and not this podcasting network. But 6 since Wednesday. And as soon as I press the stop button, I'm pressing the record button to do Wednesday something else. So we're just going to end things here. I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please give some good feedback here. And, we'll talk to you again later on.